the news this morning in the WNBA sphere, they were responding to some expansion tweets back in May,
I saw that.
and everyone's trying to figure out what does it mean.
I honestly,
Like, is the Bay Area team going to happen? Is have they secured it? Because I
I
haven't
mean,
seen any.
honestly, I'm happy if there is an expansion team, but I feel like there's a lot of other stuff that they should probably work on first. Like travel is probably one. I think that's a big one. And I feel like and people probably gonna give me a lot of flack for this one, but I feel like they should do roster expansion first and then possibly team expansion.
There were a few who were saying, "Hey, if you can expand rosters and get an expansion team, get a few more slots in there, it's worth considering." But it seemed like an odd time to respond to tweets from 4 months ago when
When the
they
finals is coming up.
well, and they haven't put out any official announcement, or there
Yeah.
hasn't. I haven't come across anybody. I'm sure the writers who are involved with the sites that I read are looking into it.
I mean, honestly, I just think because it's obviously expansion is something that everybody in the league has been talking about for a long time. And I think now, like, since it seems like the league is getting more popular with all the ratings going up, I guess people feel like, yeah, now's the time to expand. And the WNBA Canada game, like that showed that people really want to watch the product. But again, I have no issues with expansion, but I definitely think some other things should be fixed first before they expand, because now you expand teams and you get more teams, and now you have the same issues that's going on, but you just have more teams, so that means there's more issues. But I would love to see an expansion team, but again, I feel like maybe roster expansion first, and then fixing like the travel situations and all of that, and then get another team in there.
Yeah, well, hey, it would. I know it's been brought up for a long time, and I remember there was a New York Times story a few years ago that said, yeah, if whether it's through bigger rosters or more teams or both, if they don't do something to address the roster issue, you might run into a situation where some college prospects think of the league as getting too they might see it as it's too hard and look elsewhere. Now with what happened in Russia, I think that changes the game a bit as far as
Mm-hmm.
overseas stuff. But I remember reading that there might be some players who think it's too hard and decide to focus their efforts on other leagues where they'll have a chance to play. I mean, the way it's set up now, it would certainly help for injuries and things so that you don't have to go through all of these hardships. But I'm wondering, you well, I know the NBA has 15 players. They play slightly longer games though, and my thought is you still have the same number of minutes. So, what will if you get a couple more players, yeah, that would go a long way. But everybody wants to play.
True.
I mean, why do you think there's so many transfers now in D1?
And
They
then
I'm not
and then
against it. It's just one of those things where, okay, it's one of those unintended consequences that people may not be thinking of, where depending on who gets those spots, are they going to have an impact or are they going to be riding the bench?
true.
It's hard. Like I'm not trying to play devil's advocate and say, oh, we
Yeah.
shouldn't expand. It's more,
you're
I feel
you're
like,
thinking of both sides of it is what it is. Like that's
yeah,
what it is. Like I think a lot of people, and you can use the CBA as an example where a lot of people were thinking, oh, more money, but they weren't thinking the other effects of like, okay, now you have people who are getting all this money and they probably didn't deserve it, but because that's the new CBA and everybody was getting paid and everybody
well, I
like they
sure
were
as
literally
heck don't.
Oh, yeah, right. Like
I sure as
there
heck
were
don't
some
deserve that money.
no, there were I feel like there should have been a stipulation. So I feel like, okay, if you played in the league for this amount of money, I mean for this amount of years, then you can get this amount of money. But there were people who were just being thrown bags of money. And that's fine. Like I'm glad a lot of the players got paid. Like I think that's a great thing that the players got more money. But again, we saw that okay, so now travel is messed up because of it, and like roster spots is messed up because of it, and all that stuff. So I feel like you're not really playing devil's advocate. You're thinking ahead, like you're kind of being like, okay, yeah, we could do this, but what we do with this now? And then going back to your point about how you were saying a lot of college athletes may feel like they have no chance. I think that's why the NIL comes to play too. Like a lot of them are like, well, I could get more money and more exposure in college than I can in a league that's supposed to be where I'm supposed to make my money at. So I mean, how many times have you heard a lot of college athletes say like, we don't even get we got chartered planes in college, and then now we're in the league and we're flying with everybody else. So just stuff like that.
In light of the earlier development this morning,
Mhm.
the commissioner will speak to media prior to game one of the finals
Mhm.
next Sunday. And Miles Ehrlich is going, I wonder if there's any major news to be broken at that time.
I mean, maybe I don't know. Kathy's kind of interesting. Like she'll break news, but she won't say much about it. She'll just be like, "Oh yeah," like she'll give a press conference and be like, "Yeah, we're thinking about doing this." But she does it. She's kind of like a teaser in a way. Like she'll tease something and then she'll leave you like, "Okay, so what was that? We want to know more."
Well, here's the biggest clue, uh, I guess, that would indicate where this is going. So they're still responding, and some guy was saying they'll tease expansion all day just to later announce that they're down to 14 finalists. And the WNBA account goes, just you wait, Justin.
Yeah, the WNBA account's been tweeting at a lot of people today.
Which
When they were talking about
tells
expansion.
me, which to me, like I said, I'm sure the writers, I'm probably going to have to split this up now because you and I have kind of turned this into a
It's
news
all
and notes
good.
update. I know you and, uh, I was going to say you and KT. I was like, wait, no, that's Reagan.
Reagan, yeah,
You and
Reagan, yeah.
yourself, like you and KT, you and yourself. Yes, you probably are having conversations with yourself, aren't you?
Hey, they say the smartest people talk to themselves. So
You've got two computers. I really think you should do a split personality podcast.
but no, that would be interesting actually. Have a podcast with yourself, but like one self is your true self and the other was like your wild side. That's interesting. That's actually a creative idea.
Yeah, but I've never known you to have an alter ego.
Hey, you know what? 2023, anything could
Uh,
happen.
but I really am going to have to split this up because this has turned into a news and
It's all
notes. I've
good.
often thought it'd be kind of fun just to, well, you and Reagan did that, but you and I have, how many times have we talked about things? So
Yeah, I'm with it. It's all good with me.
it'd be fun just because I've been trying to figure out a way to get back into it.
Hmm.
Maybe, well, obviously this season's just about done. And I don't know. I'm so busy covering high school stuff that I don't always have time to follow other games. I think you
Yeah,
see me. I'm out doing a game almost every day.
yeah.
But
That announcer life.
yes, but it sounds like this expansion thing has a strong possibility of happening if they are responding specifically to the sarcastic claims about being down to 14 finalists. And you go, just you wait, Justin. Probably wouldn't
Hmm.
respond in that tone if you didn't have something
Set
finalized or
up.
secured.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's one reason
I,
I'm going to have to split this up and get this first part up right away
hey, it's all good.
because yeah, I think we're on to something here. Well,
I
not
mean, they say Oakland
specifically.
is they're like you said, they're saying Oakland is a really big like a front runner. So I would love to see what the other if it is 14, I'd love to see what the other 13 are.
Well, again, just the way they responded, where it doesn't seem like, oh, here are the list of finalists. Like we might
Yeah.
actually see a team.
I mean, like I said, it would be cool to see an expansion team, but I'm hoping if they were, like we talked about earlier, if they are going to do an expansion team, then yes, maybe they expand the rosters too. I probably would have did rosters first, then team. But I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I just feel like there were things that they could have done first and then expanded the teams. But if that's what they're gonna do, I'm all fine with it. I mean, it would be cool to see another team up there. I mean, especially it's reminiscent, even though they're not in the same place, but it's kind of reminiscent of seeing like the Monarchs. So it like that would be the closest thing to seeing the Monarchs again.
And I know the Oakland teams, two of them moved out. Raiders went
Yeah,
to Vegas, and the Warriors moved across the block basically to San Francisco.
pretty much. Yeah,
I did read that if there is a Bay Area team, that they would play at the Chase Center where Golden State used to play,
yeah,
if I'm correct. So
yeah. Which
you
would be
already have
cool. I think that would be cool.
you already have the facilities, and then you'd get a team in Oakland again that isn't on the precipice of leaving compared to every other franchise. Well, again, Golden State technically is Bay Area, but
Technically.
you know what that could mean for you. Well, we'll have to wait until an announcement is official, because then you'd have the expansion draft. Who would teams protect?
Mm.
But maybe it would mean, if it is the Bay Area team, it could mean a possibility that your compadre Alicia gets to play a little closer to
I,
home for you. That is.
I think she's staying in Atlanta. I think Atlanta would win that. I don't think that's happening. I don't think that's happening.
See, then you could boo her
Nah,
more. Oh,
nah, I don't think I don't think that's happening.
I
I'm pretty sure Atlanta would hold on to that. And I'm not booing her no more. The last time I booed her, she dropped 26 on us. So I'm not. That's the end of my booing for her.
and I bet you she reminded you of that afterwards.
All the
Like after
time,
that game, she's like, "Yeah, keep it coming."
all the
She probably
time,
was.
all
She
the
probably called you
time.
up and said, "Hey, can you do that again?"
Man, all the time. But it was out of love though. It was out of love. I still remember that. That was the 2020, I think it was the 2021 season because that's when fans were able to come back again and
Slowly, and
ooh,
LA
yeah,
had to play that convention center for a
with
minute.
really uncomfortable bleachers. Like the seating in that convention center were not the most comfortable things ever. So imagine seeing your team get blown out sitting on those bleachers. Yeah, that wasn't a very good season for LA. But that's my team, and I'm gonna stick beside them. But, woo, yeah, that was rough.
What would you say? You were talking about the Sparks a couple of years ago, and well, that was a rough season. Oh, that was rough terrain for
Ooh,
everybody.
ooh,
I know they just missed the bubble this year, or they
yes,
missed the
just
cutoff.
missed it. Just missed
Although,
it.
who was it? Richard Cohen, the UK writer, had said if you end up finishing below eighth, it may not be the worst thing in the world because of the draft class. So I know there was still some chatter here when Minnesota made the playoffs,
Made the
because
playoffs.
well, they weren't expected to be in contention at all. So early in the season, then they lost the first 6 games. So the popular thought was, oh, maybe they should just punt for next season. And I remember talking with you about this. Hindsight, of course, makes it easy to dissect, but I don't think teams like the Lynx or Atlanta or even LA were that bad where you could try to, if you tried to tank, quote unquote. I don't think it would have
Yeah,
worked, because the Lynx, they still have a long way to rebuild the chemistry that was there. Because I think it's pretty evident, unless something behind the scenes occurs where Ariel Powers is ready to move on to another team, effectively confirming that as an example. But they had enough talent where I don't think I don't think you could have played down to the level of, say, Seattle, that's in a serious rebuild. Phoenix was a big mess this year, and looks like they still have some things to sort out. But yeah, I'm just curious what you thought. The Sparks were right there.
like what I
So on
what I
the
thought of the season,
well, or just
or
kind of this dichotomy, because on the one hand, your team doesn't make the playoffs, they come up
of
just a bit
course,
short, but on the other hand, they're going to get a top 4 pick. So depending on who declares, you could get a potentially instant impact player. So I don't know how these others feel
Mm,
about it, like yourself, where like,
so,
yeah, we didn't make the playoffs, but we might get somebody.
well, I agree with you. Like, LA wasn't that bad to the point where it was like, like, oh, they could get the number one pick, even though like they possibly can, depending on how it goes. But I mean, as a Sparks fan, it was there were some stressful times, but I will say I think that the team was a lot better than people thought they would be. I don't think people thought LA would even have a chance to get in the playoffs. I think they thought LA was pretty much a team that was like, oh yeah, this team is trash, write them off type of thing. So I think the fact that they were in the playoff hunt for so long, and then like towards the end, like the last 3 to 4 games or whatever, they kind of lost. And then on top of that, LA relied on another team, which was Chicago, to have to lose. And I can't remember who had to beat them. It might have actually been Minnesota. I don't remember, but um, LA needed Chicago to lose, and they ended up winning that game, and that's the only reason why LA was out. And then it's ironic that I believe, if my memory serves is correct, that LA literally won the last game of the season when it didn't matter anymore. So uh, that's just kind of the way that the season was going. But I, I'm disappointed they didn't make the playoffs, but at the same time, nobody thought they would be where they were. Everybody thought LA would just be terrible. So it's kind of one of those things where you're like, yeah, your Magic team didn't get in, but at the same time, you could see the progress and what they were trying to do.
And in the case of Minnesota, I feel the mood changed a bit when they were able to get one. Because I remember even a couple of writers were saying if you make the playoffs only to get run out of the building, then people might start questioning the wisdom of going for a postseason spot. But I'm
Yeah.
thinking, yeah, there's no way you could have tried to play below a Seattle that doesn't
Uh,
have a whole lot right now,
yeah.
or Phoenix when you think teams like Minnesota might have chemistry issues. Phoenix is a hot mess, and they still have pieces to pick up.
I
And,
just I've never sorry to cut you off.
oh, that's okay.
I've just never been a fan of tanking anyway, especially on purpose. And then you have to remember, you know how you said if Minnesota started off 0-6, the year that they played Chicago in the playoffs, they were 0-6, and they had a great year after that. So I feel like this is very cliche, but it's definitely not how a team starts. It's how they finish and how they go along the way. But I don't know. I've never been a fan of tanking, especially on purpose. Now, if you guys are just bad and you're just bad, it happens. I don't think Seattle was tanking. I just think they weren't a good team. So I've never liked the let's tank, let's tank, let's tank, because there's a chance that, yeah, you tank so bad, like you said, you may not get past Seattle, who's been the worst team, or like who else was down there? If I remember, like Indiana, who's been a bad team. So like, yeah, you're tanking, but you're still competing for the tank. So it's like we still may not even be the worst team, no matter how bad we tank or how bad we fall. So I don't know. I didn't believe that Minnesota was tanking anyway. I just think they could get it together.
I think it was clear they weren't going to be a contender for the title this year.
Yeah.
Nobody had that sense of delusion about them, but I do feel they show glimpses of what they could be, its consistency. And then going back to the draft class, we've talked about NIL and draft class and endorsement deals on the one hand, but on the other hand, there is that uncertainty. Caitlin Page, Van Lith, Angel Reese, I forget who else. Someone posted all of the top names. Deja
Uh,
Kelly from
I
UNC,
think
that
Cameron Brink,
Brink.
possibly. I don't remember
I
all
don't
the
think
names
all of them,
offhand.
well, I don't suspect all of them will stay for a fifth year, but the fact that any number of them could, or any one of them, we don't know. And I put this out there, didn't get a whole lot of buzz, but I haven't been an active writer for some time. But for teams that, okay, maybe aren't good enough to be a finalist yet, but not bad enough to punt, if you try to tank or punt a season, you have no idea how it could turn out.
Hmm.
Again, Caitlin Page, they may decide to turn pro next year. On the other hand, they may not. And depending on how many stay versus how many declare,
Hmm.
things might not go as expected. after next year, that won't be an issue anymore because the COVID bonus year won't be a thing. But I felt with the uncertainties of the draft class, you don't know who will declare until maybe a week or two
until they
before.
declare.
Right.
Yeah.
It's still that uncertainty phase. So I feel that would discourage teams that were in the running for the postseason from punting and trying to rebuild through the draft, because it might work out, but on the other hand, it might not. And going off what you said too, when teams punt, and it's sometimes easy to tell which teams are
Mm-hmm.
doing that, and psychologically it's just really difficult to get through the season. So if you're doing it on purpose, and I don't worry about which teams do or not, because again, I think it becomes pretty clear. It's just really difficult if you're a media member covering the team, if you're a fan trying to support the team, when you know, all right, they're already casting this season
Yeah.
aside. From an emotional perspective, I feel it's not always a great idea to punt and not focus on competing per se.
Or at least developing your players. And I think that's what Seattle was doing. I think that's what Indiana were doing. Like they were trying to develop their team, because you can see if Indiana gets the right pieces, I think they'll be really good. Like you can tell with Aaliyah Boston being there, and
Rookie of the year.
yeah, and she deserved it, honestly. Like I know it was going back between her and Diamond Miller, but I think Aaliyah Boston deserved it. Like you can just tell teams who are developing their future, even though I don't think they're trying to tank, you could tell that they're not really on a win now type of basis. But that doesn't mean they're tanking. I just think they're more so trying to see what meshes and what fits, and then seeing what pieces they can bring in for the next year. And then the problem with tanking, like you said, like let's just say you tank to try to get Paige, and Paige decides that because she was injury riddled, she wants to stay another year. So now you literally tanked for a player that's not coming out. So what do you do now? Now you have to switch
Yep.
your whole mindset and your whole idea.
And that was the point I was trying to make, that any one of those players, if you're trying to get them, if they decide, oh, I'll stick around for another year, I'm sure there'll be more than enough talent that you could pick
Of
up.
course.
But if you're making a play for Paige or Caitlin and they decide, yeah, I'll go one more year.
Especially since Paige was to play with her friend, because she really hasn't gotten a full season in, she was hurt. So I feel like and it's not just Paige, but I'm just using her as example because she probably most likely would be a number one pick. Her or Caitlin, depending on
If
what
they go
happens.
together, I'd give it to
Yeah.
Caitlin, but that was
Yeah,
because Caitlin could play. Paige was
of course.
sidelined.
Of
But
course.
Paige really hasn't had a normal season. The COVID year was her freshman year, where
Yeah.
everything was just a
Shut
jamble.
down.
Well, it was a jamble, so
Yeah.
it was a mess. I have a whole nother podcast worth
Of
say
stuff
about
about
that.
that. Yeah.
Uh, the following year, she had the knee injury with the Notre Dame game that brought up
Hmm.
questions of why you keep her in there when they're up 18.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. And then she tears her ACL. And even an old high school teammate of hers, who's a good friend of mine, was saying maybe she tried to come back a little too soon.
Too early. Yeah. We've seen that a
And
lot with athletes.
well, athletes, I can't speak for you, Crystal, but I understand athletes are stubborn in the sense that they want to play, like not stubborn that they
Yeah.
won't listen to reason.
I
But
get what you're saying.
the worst thing for athletes
Is themselves.
is themselves.
Yeah. No, I agree, because
That should be the
I
headline of this pilot podcast hybrid we're doing.
no, it's a fact, because I was an athlete, so I understand. I still have that mentality sometimes. Like even then, like
You're
I had a really
invincible,
bad
right?
yeah, like I had a really bad hip injury a few years ago, and I didn't want to go to the doctor until my friend was like, "No, you gotta go to the doctor." And I'm glad I did, because my hip was really messed up. It was technically popped out of the joint. But I feel like that's when you have to rely on a great athletic training staff and other people around you to be like, hey, I don't think you're right yet. You should wait a little bit. But I also feel like it's pressure on some of the athletic training staff to get the player out there because the coach is like, okay, are they ready? Are they ready? We need them. We need them. We saw the same thing happen with Kevin Durant and his calf that turned into an Achilles. So it's stuff like that. I feel like it's pressure on the athlete to want to get back and play, but it's also pressure on the staff because they're hearing it from the coaches and everybody else. Like, is this player ready? Like, how bad is his injury type of thing? I'm not saying that that's what Gino did. I don't think he did that. I think maybe Paige thought she was ready, but I feel like maybe somebody should have been like, hey, you should wait a little bit.
Precisely. And I haven't had that kind of injury where I've been sidelined, but the most difficult thing for athletes when you're defined by sports, and it's a story that I've heard from friends of mine, whether they're parents or players themselves who suffer injuries that
Mm-hmm.
force them to be spectators for an extended amount of time. How you go about yourself, how you go about life when the one thing or the primary thing, I shouldn't say the
Mm-hmm.
one, but when the primary element that defines you, that you work so hard for, is no longer there, well, then what? You take the thing you love most away, and it's
It,
almost like
it's
you're given a map without any sense of, you're placed in this world without any instruction booklet of
right.
how to get through it. One of my best friends who plays at Minnesota had a knee injury during summer workouts, so couldn't even get the chance to play,
Mm,
and told me it affected her for a little while. She didn't even know how to respond to all the messages she was getting. And I've had a few athletes come on when they've talked about the injuries they've incurred and how they had to work through it. But yeah, in the case of Paige, I hope that she's ready, and I guess we'll see what a full season can do. I feel like if anyone would take that year, she would be a little more likely because she hasn't
yeah.
had a chance to play altogether. Where I've said, yeah, Caitlin would be number one, Paige maybe two, but there might be some coaches who look at her history and go, okay,
Yeah, the iffy on the injuries.
might be iffy on that. And it again, it's been a while since that freshman of the year campaign. So it's
Yeah.
still there, but is it going to be the same Paige that took the nation by storm all those years ago? So I feel Caitlin is undisputedly the top pick if she were to go, if she and Paige were to go together. I feel Caitlin has the edge there, but we'll have to
It's
see.
crazy. It's crazy when you think about that. Like Paige has pretty much been playing for that long, but hasn't been because of injuries. Because I think you forget, like, yeah, 2020 was her freshman year. Then you go back and look at it, and you're like, well, yeah, all these injuries kind of set her back. And it sucks because I hate seeing people get hurt and I hate seeing injuries. So I do hope she's healthy. And I would love to see her play a full season. Like I would love to see that because I think, if she plays for UConn, it's a whole different UConn team. A completely different UConn team than what we've been seeing.
Yeah, there was one writer saying that UConn was done after last year, and I'm going, oh, wait a minute.
Mm.
They've been hurt. They've been hurt. Like last year, it seemed like the entire team was.
Yeah, that the whole team there was didn't they have to forfeit a game or something
Or they
because
had
of
to
injuries?
postpone a game because they didn't have enough
Yeah, because of
healthy
injuries.
players. Because we were all scintillating, salivating over Page and AZ Fudd, and they really
Yeah.
haven't had that chance to play together yet. So, we'll see. We touched on this a bit, where Aaliyah Boston, Rookie of the Year, that was a pretty unanimous decision. I know Diamond Miller was in there, but I think she got hurt for a while and maybe
Yeah.
knocked her out of the running. But an MVP race, I don't know if it's ever been that close. There are some people who
Man,
are ticked off that Stewie got it over Alyssa Thomas, and it came down to what, second place votes, I think. I don't think I've ever seen a race that close. In the years I covered the WNBA, generally the strongest candidate was apparent by the end of the season, whether it was Sylvia
yeah.
Fowles or Maya Moore up here. Others, I think NECA, I think she got
Candace for
one.
one.
Candace. it wasn't as if other players weren't good. It was just
Right.
the top players put out the resume, and you're like, yeah, it's a pretty
They
safe
blew him
pick.
away. Like it wasn't that nobody
Oh yeah,
else
they pretty
wasn't
much
doing
lapped
their
the
job.
field.
They just blew him away. Yeah, they lapped him.
But this year it wasn't. You had three players who all could have made strong cases for it, and some folks were angry that Alyssa Thomas wasn't voted in. And then I saw some players chime in suggesting that maybe it should be up to the players to decide, but others
Hmm.
were going, and this is how I felt, you would introduce another set of politics
You
because
would.
yes, media members have their own views of things. I know I certainly did when I was more active as a writer. And if I return, I would probably carry my perspective, but mine is different from yours, and that's fine. I, I've tried to, I'm glad I don't have to worry about ranking anybody right now. I've said I'm not comfortable with that because someone's going
Yeah.
to take it the wrong way. And it's like, no, what I think
No one's
about,
ever happy.
well, I just said who I vote for does not reflect what I think of you as a person,
Hmm.
as a human, as a character. Uh, so I'm going on with all of these different perspectives and viewpoints on how the MVP race played out and how it should have been decided. I'd have a hard time picking against any one of those three. Asia had a great year, especially with Candace being hurt, so that impacted the depth of Vegas. Stewie is Stewie.
Of course. New
I'm
York
not sure.
City, as they call it.
Yeah, well, she was no different in Seattle, so
Of
like, oh,
course.
Stewie is Stewie, and Alyssa Thomas, it's not like she came out of nowhere either. Maybe she hasn't received as many flowers because she hasn't had the postseason success of Wilson or Stewie, but I'm just curious what you made of all this and all of the chatter about should AT have gotten it or should Stewie or who should be responsible for voting. I don't know if I don't know if there's a perfect solution. I can't think of one, but you look back on that
uh
and go, well, that's not something you see
yeah.
every day.
I don't know if there's actually a perfect solution either, but I will say this. I feel like it was, in my opinion, it was between AT or Stewie. Um, Asia had a great year, but I feel like what AT was doing was historical, and Stewie literally just left off from where she came from in Seattle. So I think either those two were a right choice. I'm not mad at Stewie for having it. I wouldn't have been mad at AT if she won it. I wouldn't have been mad if Asia won it, but I feel like it was between those two for me. I mean, if AT would have got it, I would have completely understood. I mean, averaging a triple double, like that's insane, and doing it consistently too. Like not just one or two or three, 4 games. No, like literally in 40 games, like you're averaging nothing but a triple double. That's crazy. That's insane. And I feel like though, I will say this. I do hate that they don't look at players with poor records for MVP. Because if I feel like that's an unwritten rule that should be gone. Because if we're gonna talk about that, you can look at Jewel Lloyd. Jewel Lloyd could have technically been in an MVP race if her team wasn't bad. I think that's the only thing. Like, if I could change something, I would change that unwritten rule to be like, well, this person had a great year, but because their team is like 1 in 39, they can't get looked at. And I don't think that's fair. But honestly, I don't know if there's anything else you could really change. I feel like the people who voted got it right. I think if you let players vote, there might be a little biasness in those players because they might vote for people that are their friends or people they like or people who was on their team. And I agree with you. I feel like just because you vote one way doesn't mean you're saying this player is not good or you don't respect this player. I think they voted for who they felt should have won it. I think they voted for who they felt was right. And I know a lot of people were mad because of, AT was doing her thing, and she was. But I mean, I don't know. I just think to me, it was between AT or Stewie. And I mean, again, I wouldn't have been upset at either of those choices.
Jewel Lloyd, that's right, had a fantastic campaign
A great
herself.
year. A great
I
year.
I suppose too, if you include her, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have,
Hmm.
I could see it, and this is just me having been around this long enough. You would probably see more than one column about the merits of including somebody on a team that isn't
You would.
contending. But I get what you're saying, and that's and to me that's what told me Jewel was going to ball out and she wasn't going to tank. she just doesn't have a whole lot of help. And that's where it's at Seattle.
Of course.
They've got a lot of work cut out for them after the pieces that got them a couple titles in recent years left. Uh, but yeah, I think the problem if you bring in players is like you said, they might vote for their friends, or if they have any beef,
Of course.
particularly in Phoenix. I think we
That's
know
the
what's
big one.
going on there. Uh,
And I've heard people say coaches or something too, and I feel like it'd be the same thing. Coaches would vote for, either their players, or they'll vote for players that they've either coached in the past or something like that. Because like you can hear something about a player. It's kind of like telephone, right? And I say this to say you can hear something about a player that's not true, but because you saw them have one incident on the court, now you don't like them, but they're not like that outside of the game. So that right there can hinder a vote just because they did a play that you didn't like, or like maybe they swung an elbow because it was a heat of the moment and now that player's quote unquote dirty, and that hinders a vote right there. So I just feel like the best way is to do it without keeping biasness in it. But I mean, some media members, not all, some can be pretty biased as well. So I think there's going to be bias anywhere you go. But
of course.
I just feel like adding coaches and players to it might make it a little more biased than what you needed.
Of course, and that's where I was saying I never had a chance to vote for any of those end of season awards, but I'm going to have my own perspective and
Of course.
interpretation compared to other writers, and that's fine. So I know going in, I would do my best to be fair, but I'm
Right.
going to see things differently than someone else.
Right.
I yeah, I think it got a lot of people talking, and it just speaks to how much talent there is out there. Where we had all this discussion over who should have won MVP, and like I said, I don't think you could have gone against anybody. But I was curious what you thought of that because
Yeah.
of all the conversations around it, the people that were upset that Alyssa Thomas didn't get
Of course.
it.
Yeah.
In particular, I feel what it might have come down to, maybe history played a part with
Yeah.
is Stewie's a past champion, Asia Wilson, part of the defending
Past champion.
champion
Mhm.
team. Maybe that, well, I think Wilson got third based on total points, but I
Yeah.
feel
She got third. She was a
third.
third. And
I
yeah.
wonder because of what Stewie was able to do in New York and help New York
I feel
achieve.
like that was a big
Connecticut
part of it.
overachieved. Well, they had coach of the year and Stephanie
Of
White.
course.
She bounced back from a rough deal at Vanderbilt to remind folks, hey, that she still has that switch. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
I, I, I
can't.
I wouldn't want to
Oh,
be a
go
part
ahead.
of that because I wouldn't want to be a part of that voting because it's just like people on Twitter were like, show yourself who voted for this and who voted for that. And it's kind of like, you make people afraid to vote and stick by their vote. And I don't think, again, I don't think any one of those votes were bad votes at all. I just think people are fans, and that's fine. Like you're fans of a favorite player, and every year you feel like your favorite player deserves everything, whether it's an all-star appearance, whether it's an MVP, a championship. Your favorite player can have the worst season ever, but because that's your favorite player, you're like, yeah, they should win MVP. So I feel like it was a lot of that, like, oh my, this is my favorite player, so they deserve this. Not saying that nobody didn't deserve it. I'm just saying, like, in regards of how a lot of fans felt about, you know, Asia or AT not winning.
So I will ask you this. I'm not again worried about a prediction per se, but
Mm-hmm.
do you have any like viewing parties planned? Because I know you're friends with a couple players. Like, do you have like a Zoom get together when in the
Nah.
off season, or do you just trade texts?
Nah, no Zoom parties. We, if anything, it's just
I
like a
think that'd be a
text here
lot of
and there.
fun.
It would be fun, but nah, no Zoom parties. Just maybe just a text like, "Oh, are you watching this game?" and like, "Oh, what do you think?" or whatever. Like, small stuff like that, but never really a Zoom party. But I know you didn't ask for a prediction, but I say New York in five. That's what I'm going with.
All right, I was just saying, like, I could see you and Alicia just. Yeah,
Nah, no Zooms, no viewing
I think
parties.
I think you're missing out on a real opportunity here, Crystal.
I mean, it
Do
would be
like a
cool,
zoo.
but yeah, no Zoom parties. Nah, none of that. If anything, just a text like, you watching this game? And that's pretty much it.
Because I really think you could. Well, you look at those second screen experiences with Monday Night Football, the women's Final Four.
Yeah, no doubt.
We don't
Those
have
are
one for
pretty
the
fun.
finals yet. Maybe you could start one.
Hey, you never know. That's actually giving me great ideas.
That's what
You're
I'm
giving me
saying.
really
You and
great
Alicia
ideas.
get together, or AP, or maybe all three
uh,
of you do like provide that second screen Manning cast style
that would
deal
actually be
where
cool. I
where
mean,
you
hey,
just. If you'd like to support TSB television programming, check us out on Patreon, PayPal, or Cash App. And thanks for watching Mic'd Up Sports.